Hi, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country, everybody. I'm Kevin Keller, CEO for CFP Board, and welcome to today's Certificant Connection webinar. During the upcoming webinar this afternoon, we'll have updates on CFP Board's 2020 priorities, including our work to strengthen CFP Board's enforcement process, the new code and standards, and our library of compliance resources, as well as our latest practice analysis study. After those updates, we'll turn to answering your questions, always the best part of the Certificant Connection. But let me cover a few housekeeping topics before we get started. If you run into issues with the audio, or if it seems like the slides are out of sync, you should refresh your webinar console. Press F5 for those of you on a Mac. Press F5, or for those of you on a Mac, hit Command R. There is a Q&A function on your screen that you can use to submit questions to us at any time during the program. We'll address as many of the questions as possible during the Q&A session at the end of the program, but if we don't get to your question live on the air today, we will follow up and provide an answer to you. Joining us today are two distinguished CFP professionals. Jack Broad is the 2020 Chair of the Board of Directors, and Doug King is the Chair-elect for 2020. Doug, obviously, will be Chair of the Board in 2021. Before we get into our presentation, I want to acknowledge our current environment and share with you how CFP Board has navigated the COVID-19 pandemic. Like all of you, we have a business continuity plan that we activated for just this type of scenario. When the severity of the situation became clear in mid-March, we shifted all staff to remote working arrangements. And I want to say how grateful I am to the entire staff for their adjustment to the new normal, and pleased with how well we've been able to keep moving initiatives forward and providing ongoing service to our stakeholders. The safety and health of CFP Board staff, our stakeholders, our candidates, and partners remains our top priority. Unfortunately, the pandemic's escalation coincided with our March CFP exam, which was held March 10th through the 17th. More than 90+% of the exam candidates were able to complete the exam as scheduled, but about 200 candidates were impacted by test site closures. Some of those closures were announced by our exam partner, Prometric, early in the testing window. And on the last day of the testing window, Prometric closed all of its North American test sites. All candidates who were unable to sit for the exam due to the closure were rescheduled for the July exam with no postponement fee. In early May, given the forecast for the next several months, we announced that we would be postponing the July exam to September. Those dates are September 22nd through the 29th, and the final exam administration for this year is November 3rd through the 10th. Prometric centers have shared with us their safety procedures, and we can hope to continue and plan to continue to resume testing safely in September. However, we will only move forward with the planned exam administrations if we believe that they can be conducted without compromising the health of exam candidates. I'd also like to note that we decided not to add coverage of new exam topics or information on the 2020 exam. We decided that approach would be fair given that many candidates who expected to take the exam in March or July and who spent significant time and energy preparing to be tested on those topics had scheduled those exams previously. So like the rest of the world, CFP Board has been impacted significantly by the pandemic, but we are navigating the challenges and continuing to make progress on this year's initiatives. Jack, why don't you start us off and give us a few additional thoughts on today's environment?
I will, Kevin. Thank you very much, and thank you and CFP Board staff for doing all the hard work and the important things to keep things moving forward. I also want to say up front, I want to thank all of our CFP professionals for the tremendous work that you're doing to address your clients' needs during this stressful time. I know for sure that clients of CFP professionals are uniquely fortunate to have us on their side, particularly during times like this. And we also recognize that you as individuals and business owners are dealing with your own concerns and stresses. So we hope that you're taking care of yourself and placing the appropriate priority on your own well-being. While we're on this theme of the current environment that Kevin led us into, let me also right up front acknowledge the energy we're seeing in the movement to address the effects of racial injustice. You know, the tragic deaths of so many Black people in recent months have weighed heavily on all of us, and our hearts are certainly with the victims, their families, and also with the many Black CFP professionals who are part of our community and who face violence and discrimination. You know, we see increasing signs that the well-meaning talk perhaps, is turning into real action. And I want to acknowledge and applaud all CFP professionals of color and every CFP professional, quite frankly, who has been on the forefront of this fight for equity and justice. I believe the financial planning profession plays a very important role in this area, and CFP Board and the profession, we feel collectively accountable for making substantive change. Let me share some background along these lines, and my objective here is very specific. It's to make you as CFP certificants more aware of this work, because quite honestly, we want you to help us and to help yourselves advance diversity and inclusion within our profession. Most of you know by now, I hope, that it was back in 2015 when CFP Board founded the Center for Financial Planning. And its mission from the very beginning was to create a more diverse and sustainable financial planning profession so that every American has access to competent and ethical financial planning advice. So as you can hear, advancing diversity and inclusion is central to the Center's mission. There are many programs and services that have been developed that are currently being offered by the Center to align with the objective of advancing diversity and inclusion. I'm certainly not going to try to cover them all here today, but I do want to highlight one of those programs, and that is the Diversity and Inclusion Summit that we have been holding, and we will hold for the third time later this year in November. So back in 2018, the Center for Financial Planning released, as you see on this slide, an important thought leadership paper titled Racial Diversity in Financial Planning, Where Are We and Where We Must Go. The thought piece provides concrete actions that can be taken by firms, by CFP Board registered programs, influencer organizations, and others. Similarly, last year, the Center also released an additional literature review titled Why Diversity Matters. And that addresses how workforce diversity and inclusion accelerates business success in financial services. And as I mentioned, we recently announced that the third Diversity Summit will be held in a virtual format this November, which frankly opens up opportunity in a unique way to include so many more people, because our first two summits were actually limited by space constraints. So on November 18th,
Jack, it's Kevin. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm getting a lot of comments that the audio is not good, so I'm just calling that to the attention of our folks. Sam, who's with the teleconference bridge, if you would just see if you can help that. So, Jack, please continue.
Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. On November 18th and 20th, if you can note those dates, thought leaders throughout the financial planning profession will once again come together for the Center's 2020 Diversity Summit. This meeting will be focusing on actionable initiatives to advance diversity in our profession. The Center will be releasing a new thought piece, a new report, which will have actual case studies of successful diversity and initiatives, practices in the financial services industry. There will also be things like case study panels covering some of those successful diversity initiatives. There will be an executive roundtable with leaders from firms who are committed to diversity inclusion initiatives. And we also hold, you might be interested to know, a virtual career fair to close out the summit, focused on opportunities for women and people of color. So please be on the lookout for that. It's November 18th through 20th. Although it spans over several days, it's only a few hours on each of those days. And we hope you'll save the date and make plans to attend. So with that, let me shift gears and give you some insight from the board of directors standpoint, talk about where the board's focus has been this year. 2020 obviously has been an eventful year for everyone, including CFP Board. One of the big topics that we've been spending time on at the board level is what we refer to as a strategy refresh. We're nearing the end of a current strategic plan that has been in place for several years. Most of you know it. That's defined as the 4 A's, our strategic priorities, accountability, awareness, and so forth. So we're working through a process to refresh the strategy for CFP Board. As we do that, we're thinking holistically about the financial planning profession first and foremost, and then our role as a certifying organization within the profession and what our strategic priorities should be looking forward. So you'll hear more about that as the year unfolds. Also, as you would expect, enforcement is among the very top priorities for the board of directors this year. We knew after working on the new code and standards for over 4 years that our attention would need to shift to the enforcement of those standards. Additionally, as you know, there were several gaps identified in current enforcement mechanisms at CFP Board last year, which the board has been very focused on. Our work in this area actually began in earnest last summer when the board commissioned an independent task force that was solely focused on enforcement. If you could move to the next slide, please. That task force was charged with examining our enforcement practices and making very specific and actionable recommendations to strengthen and modernize them. They delivered their preliminary report to the board for our last meeting in November. We shared that final report publicly in December. We also shared the board's preliminary response to that task force report. The report was robust, it was comprehensive. I once again want to thank and commend the members of the task force for their work, and I can assure all CFP certificants that the board is taking these recommendations quite seriously. We're very committed to strengthening CFP Board's enforcement of the code and standards so that we can benefit all Americans, and we will reinforce the trust, the confidence, and the security people gain from working with a CFP professional. In the board's preliminary response, we outlined the actions that we had already taken to strengthen the enforcement program. For example, first, we no longer primarily rely on CFP professionals to disclose matters to CFP Board. CFP professionals are still required to complete an ethics declaration as part of the renewal process, but we will now supplement that with an annual background check. Our new code and standards also require CFP professionals to make ongoing disclosures of an expanded category of information and within 30 calendar days. Additionally, we are now providing consumers with access to BrokerCheck and IAPD on the listings of current and former CFP professionals on our website. And you should know CFP Board staff is continuously reviewing BrokerCheck records, IAPD, and will continue to monitor and follow up on regulatory actions by the federal government, by state regulators, and by self-regulatory agencies if CFP professionals are named. So since then, we've continued to take actions that are aligned with the task force report. For example, the board is currently engaged in a comprehensive governance review with a third-party governance expert and consultant. We're well into this process. We believe that the standards for governance practices and governance structure at CFP Board should be every bit as high as the standards that we set for CFP certificants when it comes to ethics and competency. So we're very committed to modernizing and strengthening the governance practices at CFP Board. And we look forward in the shorter term, perhaps in the next couple months, to sharing with you some of the changes and reforms we're making with respect to governance at CFP Board. This year, we will also form a new commission to review and update the sanction guidelines. And to help make background checks more efficient, we have obtained CRD numbers for almost all of our CFP professionals, and we now ask them to disclose or verify their CRD numbers when renewing. Kevin's team has conducted updated background checks on all 87,000 plus CFP professionals. These are similar to the background checks that CFP Board has historically conducted for all individuals applying for CFP certification, along with the review of BrokerCheck and all other publicly available records. The results of that comprehensive background check, it detected conduct requiring investigation related to approximately 1,240 individuals, which constitutes about 1.4% of the total CFP professional population. Those matters are now going through CFP Board's investigative and adjudicatory processes. And you should know, as a sign of how committed we are to this, the Board of Directors has committed more than $5 million to complete the investigation and adjudication of these matters. I won't review all of the additional reforms that we're making, but you see some of them listed here. I'll point out that you can also find a comprehensive listing in a recent news release that was issued last month, which was shared with our stakeholders via email. And we will be sharing updates as we continue to take actions to modernize and further strengthen CFP Board's enforcement process. Again, I want to assure you that the Board takes this work very seriously. We recognize there are still some gaps to close, but we have prioritized that work, and we're supporting the funding required to implement these improvements. Kevin, why don't I turn it back to you?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack. Thank you very much. All of us at CFP Board are committed to the important work of strengthening our enforcement program. CFP Board is the professional body for financial planning, and as such, it is essential that we uphold both our competency and ethical standards for the benefit of the public. Now I'll turn it over to Doug King. Doug is chair-elect for an update on the new Code of Ethics and Standards of Conduct.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much. And I'm very excited to be on my first call with all of you, and I'm looking forward to many more. As you all know, the new Code and Standards became effective last October and is now being enforced as of June 30th. The enforcement date brings us to the end of a 5-year initiative to modernize the ethical standards for all CFP professionals. And after the adoption of the final Code and Standards in March of 2018, the CFP Board turned its attention to modernizing our processes for enforcing the Code and Standards. Some of that just now. And our new procedural rules became effective on June 30th, and as Jack shared, we're working on many, many other enhancements to our enforcement program. Kevin?
You know, I would just want a quick shout out and thank the leaders of the Board of Directors through those 5 years. We started this at the end of 2015 when Rich Rojek was chair of the board. Mike Green chaired the board in 2016, and we got well underway then. Blaine Aiken kind of took us through all the heavy lifting of the standards rewrite. Richard Salmon chaired the board in 2018 when we first approved the standards. Susan led us through 2019, and then Jack in 2020. And also a big thank you to Ray Ferrara, who was chair of the board in 2014, for chairing the commission on standards that did the heavy lifting for the rewrite of the standards. Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, as you know, the standards was quite an undertaking, and none of this really matters if you don't know how to comply. So it's critically important that we give you the resources to do so, and the CFP Board felt that that was incredibly important for all of you to have additional resources, and many of you even asked us for this as well. So we've spent significant energy developing a library of compliance resources to help all CFP professionals and their firms to help them understand how to comply with the new Code and Standards. That library is accessible through a searchable index on our website, which can be found at cfp.net/compliance. In recent weeks, we've released some new resources that you should also be aware of. First, we have 2 compliance checklists. These new documents take the compliance guidelines that were originally included in a terrific resource called Roadmap to the Code and Standards reference guides, and also presented them in this checklist format. They're designed to help CFP professionals evaluate whether they're providing information and services to clients according with the requirements of the Code and Standards. One compliance checklist is designed for financial planning engagements, and the other is for financial advice engagements. So when you see the 2, notice the differences. Another recently released compliance resource is a guide to help CFP professionals working in call centers determine how to comply with the Code and Standards. This guideline addresses CFP professional duties by the role that they play at the call center, which generally falls in one of 3 categories. First, a service associate is someone who responds directly to orders or provides things like general financial education material or other communications that a reasonable CFP professional would not view as financial advice. Second is a financial advice associate, and this person would provide financial advice. Or third is a financial planning associate who actually does financial planning. All 3 of these duties are outlined in an easy-to-digest way that might be helpful, a reference for other CFP professionals who work in other environments as well. We also recently released a new guide comparing the Code and Standards to the SEC regulations Best Interest regulation that just came out on June 30th as well. So CFP professionals who are registered representatives of broker-dealers, they're subject to both the code and standards of the CFP Board as well as Reg BI. And while the standards, or the code and standards of the Reg BI contain many similar requirements, there's also many important differences. So this guide isn't intended to be a comprehensive list of all of these differences and similarities between the Reg BI and the code and standards, because there's still a lot of uncertainty about how Reg BI will be enforced. But it does address key areas of particular significance to the CFP professionals, such as duty of care and loyalty, and how to address and disclose conflicts of interest. So check that out. It's a very valuable resource. These are only part of the library of guidance materials on the new code and standards that have been developed with the assistance of our Standards Resource Commission. All of us at CFP Board are committed to helping CFP professionals and the profession itself understand and live our fiduciary promise to the public. The new code and standard not only raises the bar further for the CFP certification, but also the financial planning profession and financial advice industry. And most importantly, it provides the public the assurance that the CFP professional is trained and has been tested and can be trusted to do what's right for them. I'm also pleased to share 2 additional resources that help explain what the code and standards mean for the public. The new brochure and a short video highlight a CFP professional's fiduciary duty under the code and standard and explain why a CFP certification is important when seeking a competent and ethical financial planner. We hope you'll share these resources with your clients and prospective clients. The brochure fits in a standard envelope, and you'll be able to order copies of the brochure directly from your online CFP Board account. And the video will be available soon on the CFP Board's YouTube channel, and you'll be able to share that on social media or other embedded on your websites. So back to one of you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Before I get to your questions, I just want to cover one additional important project that helps us advance the profession of financial planning. CFP Board is a certification and standard setting body, but really we are in what I call the financial planning competency assurance business. We assure the public that the individuals who are certified undergo a rigorous process before they're allowed to use the CFP mark. This process involves satisfying requirements for education, experience, examination, and ethics. This is consistent with our mission of certifying financial planners for the benefit of the public. So CFP Board upholds not just ethical standards, but competency standards as well. Our efforts in ensuring a valid certification program are essential in maintaining our accreditation. CFP certification is accredited by the National Commission of Certifying Agencies, or NCCA. And NCCA accreditation is the leading standard for professional certification programs. It is essential for trust and legal defensibility of our certification. On the FINRA website, there are 200 plus certifications and designations in the financial services space. And of those, only 11 are accredited by NCCA. As some of you know, CFP certification was the first accredited certification outside of the healthcare industry way back in 1995. In 2019, we undertook the renewal process for our accreditation and passed it. We'll again be reviewed in 2024. Given our accreditation requirements, we are required to undertake regular reviews of the certification program and update it through what is known as a job task analysis, or as I prefer to call it, a practice analysis. Every 5 years or so, we conduct the practice analysis, which we call, as I said, the practice analysis. The findings of this major research project establish our principal knowledge topics and the job task domains, which make up the topics that are included in the curriculum for our registered educational programs, the topics that are covered on the CFP exam, and the topics that we accept for continuing education credit. This year, we're also developing a competency framework that will describe the attributes, aptitudes, and skills financial planners need to succeed. As in the past practice analysis studies, a major component will be research with CFP professionals. Surveys of CFP professionals are currently in the field, and for those of you who have completed one, we very much appreciate it. This year's study will include some new elements, including research with both firms that hire CFP professionals as well as clients of CFP professionals. We look forward to sharing with you the updated topics and domains and introducing the new competency framework to you. So that's kind of what's going on here. We're about 32 minutes into the hour, so that leaves us a good 25 minutes or so to get to your questions. I'm going to start off the first question, Doug, because I'm going to go to you. We're right in the middle of the nominations process for new board members. Maybe you might take a minute and let folks know how that process is going and where we are and a little bit about it.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Kevin. So I'm chairing the nominating committee this year. It's my honor to do so. And some of you may know that we have 16 board members on our board this year. 3 of those folks are rotating off. 2 of those are public members, and one is Jack Brode, who's on the call with us. So our goal is to try to replace a couple of the folks and the talent that we've lost. And so we approach the nominating process 2 different ways. In one way, we do it through self-nominating. We had a record year, or at least a banner year. We had 101 CFP professionals who self-nominated, and it took our committee a very long time to diligently go through all of those resumes, and it was a great group of folks that self-nominated. We also hire a third-party consultant to help us look for public members who may not know that they should be self-nominating. And that company found probably 35 or 40 wonderful public members and presented 9 of those to us. And so at this point, we've selected a group to do phone interviews as of the week of August 10th through the 21st is when we're going to do those phone interviews and whittle that group down. Then we're going to go through in-person interviews in October for the ones that make it through the phone ones. And then November 5th will be the board elections, where we'll actually elect those, and then shortly after that, we'll announce it to the public. So a lot of great things happening there.
And Doug, we're looking for 2 or 3 new board members. So we appreciate all the people who put their name in, but it is very competitive.
Yes, it is. I understand it's actually harder to get on the board than it is to get into Harvard or Yale. So those of you that make it, it's pretty darn good, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Jack Owen asks, are there going to be more opportunities in the future for CFP professionals who want to work for hourly compensation rather than for a percentage of money managed or insurance sales? Comprehensive planning should not have to include the sale of anything else. Jack, would you take that?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question, Owen. I referenced early, we have a vision for this profession for the future that every American has access to competent and ethical financial planning advice. So the idea of choice is very relevant to that objective of access. I think as you and others may know, we see the development of alternative fee models such as subscription-based models or retainers or hourly models, as you cited, Owen, growing in prominence, and we think that having choice is good. The traditional AUM model, we're sure will continue to carry on. However, it does not necessarily fit for all client situations. So to answer your question, I think we will see increasing opportunities in our profession for hourly and subscription, and I'll say less traditional types of fee models. And we think that that's great for the consumer of financial planning services, and we think that that's also a very good thing for the business and the industry of financial planning.
Great. Thank you very much, Jack. A couple of quick questions here. People are asking. We have literally dozens of questions coming in. A couple relate to our website and how do they get their name listed. Gail asks, how do I get my name included on the website? And Charles asks, what is the address for the Find tool? So the address is letsmakeaplan.org. That's the consumer-facing website. And how do you get your name included on the website? You have to indicate that you're accepting new clients and that you are that your certification is active. You might think everybody would be in that category, but they're not. And if you have a question about how to do that, please contact CFP Board, and one of our stakeholder reps will walk you through the website to make sure that your name shows up when people are searching for a CFP professional. Jack, the next question to you, question 12 comes in, and that question is from Michael, who asks, when are we going to become a real profession, Michael asks, and why can't we emulate the ABA? And I think he means the American Bar Association.
Thank you, Michael. It's a timely question. As I mentioned earlier, as we're working our way through a strategic refresh, we're starting, quite frankly, at the profession level and thinking about what does the desired future state of a true recognized and regulated profession look like, what are those components, and what types of strategies can be developed to get us from where we are today to that point. So we're discussing what makes a profession and where financial planning stands in relationship to established professions as context for our work to update these strategic priorities. We continue to look at professions like law and medicine and accounting, for example, to learn what we can. The idea, it's important for us to remember, because it seems like the pace is never fast enough for any of us, but I think it's important for us to remember that the idea of financial planning as a profession was generated only 50 years ago. In fact, we celebrated that milestone in December of last year. So we do, in fact, have much to learn from professions like law and accounting that have been around for centuries. And we are very much committed to continue to, I'll say, climb this mountain that we're on to achieve recognition and regulation as a true profession. Thanks for asking, Michael.
Thank you, Jack. We have a couple questions about the Find tool and fee only. So, Doug, I'm going to come to you for the next question. Question number one. Lane asks, would the CFP Board please reconsider distinguishing fee-only fiduciaries from those who are not fee-only? And at the same time, Charles asks the question, what is the plan to address the tool and give the public better information on fee transparency? Doug?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. We appreciate the question. And first of all, we want to let everyone know that we do recognize that when we did make the change, we perhaps could have done a better job with explaining why we did that. So I'm glad the question was asked. Is that in the past there's many different ways that financial advisors and financial planners get paid. In the days prior to our new standards, we had commission-based, we had fee-only, we have fee-based, and we looked at each of them. We do recognize that there's associations that are working, exclusively for the benefit of the fee-only folks. We do recognize that many people do market their way that way to try to add distinction, and we don't have any issues with you continuing to mark yourself, based on the way you get compensated. As a matter of fact, we really expect you to disclose exactly how you're compensated, no matter what that method is. But when we looked at the new standards, we recognized that at this point, under the new standards, all CFP professionals must act as a fiduciary at all times. And so when we look at that and we say to ourselves that, there's really not that much of a distinction relative to what a CFP professional is all about at this point, we felt it would just made more sense for us just to take that off as a search function. And again, we don't have a problem with you marketing yourself that way, as long as you're being fully disclosing all of your conflicts of interest and your compensation. But we just didn't feel that was a priority for the CFP board at this point. The other question had to do with the website. That website is 8 years old, and just so everyone does understand, we are spending resources in updating that website. We do expect to have, I think later on in the fall, early next year at the latest, we are expecting to have a new tool out there, and we are looking at everything we can in terms of what should go in there to help really identify the CFP professionals and make sure that the public can access and find those of you that work so hard to get your designation.
Great, thank you very.
Hey, Doug.
Thank you very. Go ahead, Jack.
Kevin, can I add just a finer point on that? A couple things for the Let's Make a Plan website that is a consumer oriented. That there will be thorough consumer testing. We want to put something out there that will really help benefit consumers in their process of working with a CFP professional. And, when this topic comes up, I also like to point out that within the new code and standards, there's still very much a duty to provide information to a client, which includes prior to or at the time of engagement, how a client pays for products and services, and a description of the additional types of costs that a client may incur, and how the CFP professional, the CFP professional's firm, and any related party are compensated. So there is still very much a duty to provide that information to a client. Additionally, we have not walked away, certainly, from the term fee only, and it's called out in our new code and standards. Under the number 12, the duty when representing compensation method. So, you can only use the term fee only if the CFP professional or the CFP professional's firm receives no what we call sales-related compensation, and that's a defined term. Nor does any related party receive sales-related compensation. And we make it very clear about the use of terms such as fee-based and so forth. So we still have a duty to provide clarity to consumers about how compensation is represented. What was announced several months ago had to do with a search filter. That one of the things that got lost in the messaging is of the 600,000 people that come to the site every year, less than 7% of them were even using that filter, and there were other problems associated with it. So as we do this redesign with letsmakeaplan.org, which you'll see relaunched later this year, all of this type of consumer information is being considered and will be presented in a way that will make consumers be able to make smart choices in working with CFP professionals. Sorry to take so long, but I think it's an important topic that required a little bit more response. Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, Jack, absolutely. So, Doug, coming to you next for the third question in the queue, or the third question that came in from Gerald. Gerald writes, what is the response to the statement, and then he writes, quote, the CFP board looks like it is becoming a regulatory body. That's Gerald. Doug, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Look, we understand why a question like that would be asked. We've spent a lot of time and effort communicating our new standard, our code and standards and procedural rules. We spent a whole lot of time reaching out to firms and individuals over the last 5 years. And with everything that's been out there, I'm sure it's easy to kind of come to some conclusion and wonder if that's what we're trying to do. But I think it's important to understand that the CFP board has an obligation to enforce its own standards. We're not seeking to be a regulatory body. We don't have authorization at all to be a regulator at this point. There's actually significant differences between a voluntary certification organization like the CFP board and a regulatory body. And so there's many of them, but just for one example, unlike a government regulator or an authorized SRO, the CFP board, we don't have subpoena power. We don't have the ability to define or levy fines, and we can't demand restitution for clients. Those are regulatory things that are allowed, and that's not within our domain. So just look at, we get it, and why people ask that, but let's be very clear. Without our enforcement of our own standards, the CFP profession would not be as strong as it is, that gold standard. And so we're going to be spending a lot of resources on a lot of things to really make you all the very best in the industry. But we also want to protect that brand as well by making sure that we can back up everything that we're trying to say. So thanks for the question.
Yeah, and Gerald, the only other thing that I would add to that, this is Kevin, is that when we survey CFP professionals every 2 years, setting and enforcing our standards, it ranks among the highest priorities of the CFP community. So just a data point to share with you. Jack, the next question's for you. Tom asks, to whom is the CFP board accountable?
Excellent and very important question, Tom. Thank you. The answer is simple. It's the public. Our board of directors owes its authority to and operates on behalf of the public, first and foremost. And I'm glad you asked because, excuse me, I've learned in my role here with CFP Board that it's not always well understood, the nuances perhaps and the differences between, for example, a membership association. Many of you are familiar with FPA or NAPFA. Those would be C6 membership associations that exist to benefit the members. CFP Board is a C3, and therefore that's why we have a public mission, and our board of directors therefore derives its authority and legitimacy from the public. Now, we take that very seriously. We don't overlook the fact that CFP certificants are a key stakeholder group, and the firms that employ them and colleges and universities that have registered programs. So we naturally have to think about our complete stakeholder map. But to be clear, we are a C3 with a public mission, and that's an important part of our decision-making process and our policy setting. So I hope that provides some further clarity.
Thank you, Jack. We have a couple of questions, again, about enforcement that I would share with you. Kenneth asks, in regards to the new ethical enforcement, how frequently will thorough background checks be done by CFP Board? Mark asks a similar question. So will you be pulling our credit reports on a regular basis from now on? So I will take that question because it's a staff function here. We are scraping the broker check and IAPD database on a monthly basis. to see which CFP professionals have new entries. We'll be looking at those. And we're also working with Westlaw, which is where a lot of civil actions like bankruptcies are indicated. We do not pull credit checks, but our intention is to do that on a monthly basis. Doug, next question for you. Question 8. Is it Johan or John asks, what do we need to do to comply with the new rules? How is it more encompassing than the regulation best interest going into effect last week?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Actually, in my comments earlier, I did spend a fair amount of time talking about a number of resources that we have established and published under our compliance section. And if you haven't gone through those, we'd highly recommend that you spend time reading those. A number of resources have come out late last year. There's a continuation, been updated as recently as this week, and we plan on continuing to put more resources out as they come out. So it's important to spend time on our website because there's a whole litany of things that you can do to help comply. I think, let's see, how is it more encompassing than the regulatory best interest? We also have, I mentioned on the comments as well, we did a piece that really compared our standards versus Reg BI. And as I said previously, we do know that Reg BI, we don't know actually how it's going to be enforced, the interpretation. Sometimes the words and the interpretation relative to the enforcement is different. But as we start to gain knowledge on that, we'll continue to build on our body of knowledge relative to the resources we're posting on our website. So I would encourage you to look there.
Thank you very much, Doug. Just a couple quick ones we can, I think, handle really quickly. Tom says, not a question, but a shout out. I think the case studies are a great addition to the resources for advisors. Thank you, Tom. Once again, the website address where you can find all of our guidance is cfp.net/guidance. Another quick one, Mike asks, what's the trend in the number of people taking the CFP exam? Is it rising or falling or staying even? We have about 8,500 people last year sitting for the exam, a 62% pass rate. This year we're budgeting for 7,500 and depending on as I mentioned in my comments, the delay of the exam and the impact of the virus, we'll see where that actually takes us. Jack, question 6. Kathy writes, can you share an overview of the Know Your Technology guidelines and any other considerations for certificants that they should consider as it relates to our new code and standards?
I can, Kathy. Thanks for the question. It's obviously an important topic these days as staff and the board of directors were working through the code and standards over the past year. This topic, obviously, of technology was front and center. These days, it's so deeply integrated into the way financial planning services are provided that we felt it would have been a miss to not address it head on. So, as you point out, the new code and standards does, in fact, include a new principles-based standard that sets forth duties when selecting, using, and recommending technology. And I'll hit them real quick so everybody is familiar with them. 3 things. The CFP professional must exercise reasonable care and judgment when selecting, using, or recommending any software, digital advice tool, or other technology while providing professional services to a client. Second point is that a CFP professional must have a reasonable level of understanding of the assumptions and outcomes of the technology employed. And the third point is a CFP professional must have a reasonable basis for believing that the technology produces reliable, objective, and appropriate outcomes. So approval of the technology by a CFP professionals firm is a factor that CFP Board will consider in determining the reasonableness of a CFP professional's care when using technology. I mean, this simply boils down to a due diligence issue. We think going forward, it's important for the profession to raise the familiarity and awareness of what sits behind the technology that is assisting you in providing advice to your clients. So obviously a topic that will continue to be front and center for years to come.
Great, Jack. Thank you very much. There's one more question. When you asked the question, Jack, or when you answered the question, to whom is CFP Board accountable to, you talked about the public. Hubert asks how many members of, quote, he puts it in quotations, the public, serve on the board of directors, and I'll answer, Hubert, that question for you. Roberta Carmel is a public member. She was the first female to sit on the Securities and Exchange Commission, so an SEC commissioner. Latha Ramshad, Dr. Latha Ramshed, formerly the head of the Business School of the University of Houston and now the provost for the University of Missouri at Columbia, is a public member. Dane Snowden, who is a public member. Dane serves as the Chief Operating Officer of the Internet and Television Association here in town, a public member. And finally, Denny Crawford, or Denise Voigt Crawford, is the last of the four public members. And Denny is the former head of the former Securities Commissioner for the state of Texas. We are just about out of time. We thank you all for joining us today. Jack, turn to you for a few parting words.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Once again, I really want to thank the CFP professional community for its support of CFP Board and the CFP certification, and equally important for what you're doing for your clients day in and day out. These are tough times for all of us. Again, as you take care of your clients, take care of yourself, and I guess I'll put in one last reminder or appeal that I really encourage you to join our work to help advance diversity and inclusion within our profession. There's lots of ways to get involved. There's scholarship funding, there's mentoring, there's offering internships, apprenticeships, at the individual level, as leaders within your firms, lots of different ways. And the 2020 Diversity Summit going virtual provides a great opportunity for you to engage in this critically important topic. So please plan on joining us November 18th through 20th. You'll see more information promoting that as we get closer. Thanks, Kevin, and thanks to all of our attendees today.
I'd like to also thank the CFP professional community and everyone who supports it. 2020 is going to be a critical year for the CFP Board and the CFP certification. And so as we begin enforcing this new code and standards and continue to work to modelize and strengthen our enforcement process. So we want you to take advantage of all the great resources that are available on the new code and standards. And just remember that these code and standards not only raises the bar further for the CFP certification, but also the financial planning profession and the financial advice industry as a whole. And the CFP Board is committed to helping the CFP professions and professionals understand and live our fiduciary promise to the public. So I want to thank you all.
Well, and Doug, thank you, and thank you, Jack. I appreciate your leadership, and I thank everyone on the board of directors for your dedication, and thank the CFP professional community. I encourage all of you to keep in touch with us. In closing, thank you for joining us today for this webinar. A recording of this presentation will be posted on CFP Board's website within the next few business days, and CFP Board will follow up individually with those who ask questions for whom we did not have time to get to during this broadcast. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great day.